In this episode of Comic Book Savant, Comic Book Collector's Guide, we're going to talk about something a little bit different when it comes to the hobby of collecting comics that we haven't talked about before, comic book conventions, and how they're a vital part of your comic book collecting hobby. So right after this, we're going to jump right in. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant. I'm your host, James Harris. Welcome back to the Comic Book Collector's Guide. I appreciate all your guys' support. This has been one of the most popular series on the channel at this point. I really appreciate you guys getting into it. I've had a really fun time doing it. So this episode is going to be a kind of shorter one because normally they run a little bit longer. And I wanted to talk about an area of the comic book collecting hobby that we haven't talked about yet, which is comic book conventions. They can be a really good place when we talk about things when it comes to relation of buying comics, finding those hard to get books or hard to find books. You can do it, like I said, I've done previous episodes where we talked about online versus local comic shops, but comic book conventions are great places to get comics for your collection and get back issues. Again, depending what it is that you're into, trades, hardcovers, back issues themselves. It's a good source. So what I wanted to talk about is some of the different conventions that go on around the country. Convention season normally ramps up probably, I'll say most typically convention season ramps up about April, May, and runs all through the summer, with New York Comic Con being one of the largest, and also so we have San Diego Comic Con right in the middle of July. Then we have New York Comic Con that's coming up. I think it's in September, middle of September, if I'm not mistaken. Then also around Father's Day in June, another big, relatively big convention, not as big as San Diego or New York. You have Heroes Con from in Charlotte, North Carolina, which I've been to that convention because I lived in North Carolina for a long time, for like 21 years. So I went to Heroes Con quite a bit, and it's one of the conventions I'm most familiar with. So I'm just going to run down some other ones because it's plenty all around the country. So no matter where you are in the country, you should, you should be able to find a convention. You have WonderCon, which is, I think, in Seattle, Washington. You have San Diego Comic Con that I mentioned earlier. You have Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina. No, WonderCon. Where's WonderCon? I can't remember where WonderCon is. Emerald City Comic Con is in Seattle, Washington. Then we got the New York City Comic Con. We have the Motor City Comic Con, which is in the Detroit area. MegaCon, which is MegaCon is Florida, if I'm not mistaken. We got the Baltimore Comic Con, Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo, Wizard World Philadelphia Comic Con, Denver Comic Con, and Houston Comic Palooza. So these are just some of that I did research on that were like the kind of the top echelon, but it's many, many more. A lot of times, and I mean, I've been to different varieties of Comic Cons. I've been to some that were like in local cities that I've been in, where like a lot of the local comic shops would come together and do like a convention in a ballroom of a hotel. And, they would bring back issues and have trades. When you go to a more kind of scaled up con, like I said, I had most experience with Heroes Con because for the longest time I lived in Greensboro, North Carolina, which was just an hour and a half drive away from Charlotte. So I think I went to Heroes Con about four or 5 years. And it was a great experience because over the years that I went, I had a chance to see that show grow considerably in popularity and the scope of the convention. When I first went, it was really on a smaller scale. And I went before I started getting into comics heavily, far as what I do now with YouTube and with my podcast. I went just like as a fan years and years ago, and I went and it was like one room. It was super scaled down. It wasn't a major presence of different companies and so forth there. Now, as time went on, it got quite large. And the last Heroes Con I went to was it's been a while now. It's been quite a few years, but it was right at the time when Matt Fraction had came off of just had finished up his Immortal Iron Fist run, because I'll never forget that hardcover collecting the series had just came out, and it sold out at the show because I was waiting for it to come in the mail. I wanted to buy it to get him to sign it. And it had sold out so quick because everybody was buying copies from the Marvel booth, getting him to sign it. So, that I'm dating it right there. So that was like quite a few years ago at this point. And it had grown in size. You saw big writers. Like, I think at that convention alone, they had multiple panels. I went to a couple of panels because I never had that experience before. And they had so many. They had people like stars like Rosario Dawson there, because she had a book coming out at the time. It was Joe Quesada, Dan DiDio, Mark Wade, all these super creators. I think Brian Michael Bendis was there. I actually got in the elevator with Dan DiDio and Palmiotti, and he picked on me because I was such a big guy. He was like, "Hey, big man." And I was like sweating bullets because I was all nervous because like I looked. And if you've ever seen Dan DiDio do an interview, it is hilarious, and he has this distinct voice. So hearing him and again, I walked into the I think they were already in the elevator, and then I walk in, so I'm looking them dead in the face, and then like I turn, hit the button, and they're back talking, and they're kind of joking with me, and it's like, "Gosh, you're a big man, and big man, why you sweating so hard, So it was like you get those crazy type experiences. I've also had a chance as a podcaster. I'm just about to hit my 13-year anniversary of being a audio podcaster. I've just been on YouTube a little bit over a year. So I've actually even been to a convention as a fan. I've also had a chance to go as an exhibitor and get a press pass. And I even had a table all set up early on when I was doing my podcast. I was really inexperienced to fully take advantage of the situation. I met some cool people. But again, it's so much to do at a convention. It's so many books on sale. Like, you'll see different things at conventions. Like, they'll have a section maybe with $5 trades. If you're in the statues, you can find the statues there. When you get into comic memorabilia, if you want CGC graded books, there's dealers selling those there. It's just so much. It can be like sensory overload. Like I said, Heroes was just big enough for me. I want to go to San Diego Comic-Con at some point, but it is a massive undertaking, and those tickets sell out so quickly. Like, literally, when those tickets go on sale, I think they go on sale like October, November each year for the following summer. Like, I've literally seen where tickets sell out in minutes for San Diego Comic-Con. That is like the comic book convention of comic book conventions. So if you're going to try to go to that, or maybe like New York Comic-Con, you definitely have to plan ahead. And it's just search the different names. And what I'll do in the description box of this video, I will try to find all the links, because most of the time these conventions will have links to their site, because they're prepping and getting guests all year round, so that, if you can find the one closest to you and you can start planning now, because it's pretty much not too many conventions left in this year, but you always got to plan ahead for, the following year. So maybe it's too late for some conventions in 2018 as far as the bigger ones. And do some searching online to see if it's any smaller comic book conventions in your local area. It's always good to get that exposure and get out there and see what deals you can find. I've done, great shopping. So let me end on this. If you're going to go to a comic book convention, it's some things that you need to know. Kind of like a survival guide. Always have a backpack ready to go. Have you some water, have you some snacks, Because if you're waiting for artists or things like that to get something signed, you might be in line for a long time. A lot of times, especially when it's bigger conventions, it's people everywhere. So you are going to sweat and you're going to smell people, because not everybody has high hygiene that collects comics. You'll get hit with some smells you have never smelled before at a comic book convention. Trust me. Have you some hand sanitizer, because not everybody's that clean, and someone always ends up getting sick after coming off a convention. I've had it happen, and I've seen it happen too many times. So hand sanitizer, towel, water, snacks. Make sure you have a shopping list, or at least have a list done up on your phone that you can check up so you don't double buy, because I've made that mistake, or I've double bought something. Be willing to have extra money set aside. Have as much cash on hand as possible, but be responsible, people. Because I've been on both sides. I've been when I went to a comic book convention and I was like, I got a budget and I'm gonna stick to the budget. And then other times that got totally thrown out of the window and I totally spent way more money than I should have. So you definitely want to have a budget in mind. Also have a little money set aside, especially if you go to a convention that you're away from your home, that you didn't drive to, that if you buy a lot of stuff, that you have money that you can ship your books home. I've seen that. That's a really cool tip that I've learned from a few friends of mine, that if you buy a lot and you don't want to carry it in your luggage or potentially get it damaged, you can just ship it before you leave, before you leave to go back home, and your books will get safely there, and you are responsible because you can pack them up the way you need to. And that's it. Those are just a few things. Like I said, I just wanted to lightly touch on the subject because I hadn't talked about comic conventions, and it is a big part of the system, or the culture of collecting comics, and I hadn't had a chance to touch on it. So those are just a few tips. If you like this video, I'll have a link above here to the playlist to the rest of the episodes in the Comic Book Collector's Guide. If you do like this episode and you haven't already subscribed, please do. If you have, make sure you click the bell notification down at the bottom to be alerted when new episodes drop. I normally drop content every Tuesday and Thursday. And that's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time for another episode of the Comic Book Collector's Guide. My name is James Harris, the Comic Book Savant, and I'll see you soon. Take care.